Welcome back to the workshop. Today I'm going to talk about some of the pros and cons of the portable workbench. This is the workbench that came from Chad Stanton's plans, and I have a video talking about just the basics of this thing, which you can see here, the link. It's also part of my workshop series playlist, and you can check it out there. So as far as this bench is concerned, a lot of people have asked, what are the pros and cons? Does it work with big wood? Does it work with small wood? What kind of woodworking can you do? And certainly it does have limitations, and so I'm going to show some of the good parts and some of the bad parts, and you can decide for yourself. Starting out, let's look at some different wood sizes that I use and maybe some of you use in some of your woodworking. One size that a lot of people use is this is a 2x4. Almost 6 foot, not quite, but a lot of people will work with an 8-foot board or like a 2x8, a 2x6 board at 8 feet long. And I had several of those, but I used them for my deck steps project last year, so I don't have any more. Putting this in relation to the bench only goes to here, and this thing goes much longer. So if you need to thin this down, it might pose a little bit of a problem on this surface. Now we have the leg vise right here, and we have dogs, but that's for much shorter boards. And for a bigger board like this, it's not really quite work. Now the Worx Pegasus might be able to handle this, and so in this video I'll be talking about the portable workbench, but the complementary other video we'll talk about the Worx Pegasus. Now, if I wanted to cut this board, there are two options. I could take the top saw bench down, put it next to the other one, put this down between them, and cut in the middle. That's one option. Another option I can do is leave the table where it is. I'll do it on this side so you can see what I'm doing. Using a couple of my hold down clamps that you saw in the Jigs and Helps Part 2 video. Now, of course, I wouldn't have this here. This would be on the other side, but I'm doing this for your purposes. Boom. With my line, I can cut very easily right here, and I get a good clean cut. I do have a cross-cut saw, a power circular saw, but I rarely ever use it. By the time I get it connected, get my eye protection, my ear protection on, I could have cut a line using this Harbor Freight saw. Another neat thing about this bench Pro is you can walk all the way around and do stuff over here, and then you can walk around and do stuff over here. You can get all the way around the workpiece that you're working on, whereas if you have a traditional European bench or something like that up against a wall, you're limited to just what you could work on at this level, and you can't get around it. And so one thing I like to do is be able to get around the bench and work on other sides. That's very helpful for me. Let's say that I would like to take this board and cut it down this way, lengthwise. I'd like to cut it lengthwise. Again, I could take the top of the bench off and use it as a saw bench and cut it as you would with a saw bench. Of course, I have a saw bench, and I could use that as well. This is a little broader and a little more weighted, and so actually it would probably be more ideal. Another, if it wasn't so tall, or if I wanted to use a stool, I could stick it in the vise here. This is the face vise. Now, I mean, this is really high for doing it here, although if I do have a shop stool and I can get on the stool and do it and just work my way down. If the board only comes up to here, the Parthenon that I'm working on right now, that started as 2 boards of Purple Heart that were about, let's see, this is a 5-foot board, probably a 3 or 4 foot board. And I had to cut those lengthwise. And so starting with using this saw, going down this way, but then I worked up to a Japanese saw, a pole saw, which worked a little faster and gave me a finer cut. but this still worked in this setting. The only difference is that, you know, it's rumbling around. And so if you have a loose concrete floor in your garage like I do, it's going to move around. And if that bothers you, that would be a drawback. Whereas on a European bench or a bigger bench, there may not, you know, where you have the 4 solid legs, you won't have as much of that much of a problem. And so there is a degree of, but it's not tipping over. And it really has to rock and roll quite a bit before you have any kind of tumble. And I've never had it tumble over. That's never been an issue for me. Other things that you can do with the big board, just like anything else, any other size wood, maybe you need to drill a hole or bore a hole or do a mortise. Of course, you want to have wood underneath so you don't have too much of a blowout when you go through with your tool. But setting them such like this, and then again with the hole downs. Get these a little closer to the edge. Now again, this is a lot of doing stuff, and if you're the kind of woodworker that doesn't like to do a lot of clamping and holding down and stuff like that, this may not work for you, but it doesn't bother me at all. Working in a garage where I can set it up when I want to or whatever, this works very well. Get into the Dutch chest. Just get a small one. You know, this is an auger bit. There we go. So if you're doing this kind of work, something like this, you know, using your brace into a spot, or if you're using a mortise chisel. Let's see, here we go. You're making mortises. The thing about a bench like this, especially when you're making dovetails, mortises, or any just banging around on the table, because this is a wooden surface, it really holds that sort of vibration very well. And so you're going to sit here and you're going to be with a mortise chisel or cranking that brace or something like that. There's a little bit of vibration, just a little bit of vibration, but if you tried to do this on a Worx Pegasus or a workmate or something like that, you just get a little bit of bouncing around on the floor. It doesn't really seem to hold unless you weight it down. If you weight your benches, your portable workbench down. But so there's just something about having a wooden workbench, even a portable one like this, just really can take the vibration and the impact of using a hammer or a mallet or something like that. And so that's one benefit. But anything else, if you're using a power drill or something like that, as long as you've got the boards underneath, go to town. Just drill right through. You can saw. At this point, it is raised up. You could do a saw if you're going to do a slot or something like that. You can easily use it for that. And again, its size is not, as long as you don't catch yourself walking around the table, you don't run into it or something. And the way I've got this run down, it might move the table, but I'm pretty much just bouncing off of it. And so, again, you make sure you can get your drawers open, but it works very well. Another common size board that I use is, this is a 1/4-inch piece of poplar, probably about a 4-foot piece. Yeah, 4-foot piece. This is common for me to use for puzzle boxes. I have made puzzle boxes out of this size, or drawers for puzzle boxes, or other things that I've made for some of the inside components. Again, it's a little longer than the table. So if I'm going to plane, although at a 1/4-inch, I'm really not planning to plane anything. And if I need some of the pieces to be slightly smaller, I always use that trick where whichever plane you want to use, maybe it'd be the jack, take my jack plane, stick it in my face vise, so it's sitting right here on the face vise, And now I've got myself a little kind of a small joiner machine and just kind of run my pieces through. And this is perfectly safe and is a really great way of chiseling down, or not chiseling, but planing down your stock. And you can adjust however you want that. You just keep your fingers away from the blade as you do with a real joiner, machine joiner, and it works very well. And so if I needed to do that kind of thing here, I would probably do it like that. So going back to the board, if I wanted to do some sawing, again, I would put the hold downs down, cut it, you know, of course on the other side, not with the tail vise, but you get the idea. If I wanted to do some cutting, if I wanted to do some sawing, what I usually do is get another one of my little things, get the 1/4 inch piece out, adjust the face vise, stick that in as the holder, stick this in wherever it is I want to go. Now, of course, as you know, it's easier to start low. Then you have less vibration in the wood. But sometimes you can't do that when you're working with a long piece. So with that like that, I have no problems working with this. It'll move around a little bit, but usually with the movement, I'm getting what I want. I'm getting the cut that I need, and if it's just a little off, I can use a plane to even that out. This piece of oak, you may remember from the Worx Pegasus video. This was a piece that was given generously by my friend in addition to the Worx Pegasus, and a piece of mahogany, which is now starting to look like Puzzle Box 4. That is currently being created. So this is more about the size of wood that I'm generally working with for making puzzle boxes or drawers or whatever. I could take this piece, cut it down into 4 pieces to make, again, a box-shaped thing like this thing, or for a drawer, or little drawers like this thing. And so there's just lots of uses. A board like this, if I need to plane it down, it's very simple to do that. Now again, this is longer than the holes, but I can also extend this back, get some of my other dogs out. And it's actually, now here's an issue that you might run into, and I am running into it right now. The board is much longer than this can extend, and by the time it comes up to where this comes up to the board is actually below it. So it's not holding it at all because it's so far away. So that is something that is a con or a bad part of this. It's just, I still have about 2 inches of the guide board inside, but it's really leaned down instead of staying up where it's supposed to be. So, and that may be the fault of when I built it. So I would have to come up with another way of holding this in place, which is not difficult to do. So, and now it works. And you see other older benches doing this as well. And so you don't necessarily have to use the tail vise extended to be able to plane your board. Of note, if you're going to do planing and you're using the bench hook arrangement, let me take this down because I really don't want to plane this board. But you're working at it, you're doing it, there's going to be a fair amount, if you're hitting grain or hitting knots or something like that, you're going to have a fair amount of, and so this thing can walk across the floor. And so that's something a lot of people have asked about, does this move around? And yes, it does. But for my needs, it works fine. It's not really that big a deal. But if you're working with big pieces of oak or big pieces of hardwood, mahogany, or something like that on a regular basis, that may not work if it's going to be walking all around your garage. But for my needs, and additionally, as I had shown in some other videos, I have chocks and things like that all stick under the foot if things get really, really wobbly. We are sort of lucky today because where it is located for this video is actually the right spot. Sometimes I'll put it somewhere and it's really wonky, but for today's video, we seem to have found the sweet spot. Of course, all the other things that you might want to do to this thing, if you want to plane it up here, and that's a good one to talk about. If you want to plane it up here, you could put it in here, but you're going to have a problem real fast. First of all, it's heavy because it's oak. Get it up to here. You want to have it right here, but it's still big and it wants to, which even if you get it in the clamp, it's still, you might start working on it and it does that very easily. So the workaround that I use for this is I get another clamp. And so I feed that underneath. And again, this is a lot of extra steps, so for those of you who don't like a lot of extra steps, you might want to skip this part. But for those of us who don't have a lot of choices, it's certainly a way to do things. So I have that set up, and what I'll do, I put this board in here, get it into that face vise, and then, now if this is going to be a face piece or something decorative, you're going to want to have a shim in there that will protect your face from the pony or Bessie clamp or whatever you have. So I'm using a little piece of plywood that I will drop on the floor. There we go. Now, it's not going anywhere. It's staying exactly where it's supposed to be. So again, grab your plane. And now, if you were going with the grain instead of against it, you would plane right across. And this would be no problem. This is a small smoother. You get something like a 4-plane. And of course, that's going to be a lot larger, and that's going to have the weight that's going to push this down. So something to keep in mind. And again, just like I did with a 1/4-inch piece of wood, you can put the oak piece right in the side using your 3/4 void gap filler. And this works fine. If I want to saw the top, if I'm doing dovetails of some sort, and I want to be able to cut that, my dovetail saw, get right in there. So another board size I have is this size. This is birch plywood that I use a lot for puzzle boxes, as well as for other things as well. 1/4-inch, very large, unwieldy. Most of the time, cutting it. Now, I could use the clamp across it like I did on the other side, but usually, I'm not going to be planing this, I'm just cutting it. Large pieces, but usually a little, down the middle or something like that. And so this holds it in pretty well. Now, if you are working in the size of entire sheets of plywood, like the large ones, this layout table back here has something that's much larger than this piece, but still not the size of a large piece of plywood. I don't think that this is going to work for you if you're going to work at the size of a large piece of plywood. A couple tools that I use a lot, a router plane and a Spokeshave, really can't be used on something like a portable workbench, like a Worx Pegasus or something like that, but can be used with the end vise or tail vise on this bench. So if you follow me on Instagram, you've seen a lot of pictures of me doing stuff like this. Doing it in this configuration has really helped in providing that service. Of course, I'm also using chisels and saws and things like that to do this. This is really more for evening it out. And then conversely, this is a lovely scrap piece that I've had for many years. Put it in the face vise, and I've got my Spokeshave, Stanley Spokeshave, and this gives me, now again I have problems with this, so I really have to find that sweet spot. There we go, that's probably a little better. Now, I'm only limited to this much of it, but there are other jigs that you can do that'll allow you a better way of accessing what you need to do. For you can do it that way, or we can do it this way. Now, one thing that I should say about this bench is that this this dowel that goes through the face vise, this is what keeps the face vise from completely turning around. It keeps it pretty much level. Mine broke, and I'm still able to use this much of it without the broken piece, but just be aware over time it will crack, and that may be the fault of the dowel. I have more dowel like this. I have no problem using it. In fact, it did break before, and there's a repair here, and so I just repaired it, and it broke again. So, you know, stuff is going to break down every so often. For this to have lasted from 2016 until 2021 is pretty incredible just by itself. This video is being filmed in 2022, so I'm able to use it just as it is. It's not a problem. The face of the face is pine. It's actually, we got two pieces of pine glued together because the grain is different. So this is pine. I chose to do that way because it's softer and would be kinder to some kinds of woods as well as hardware or something that it might get caught up in. And then if it got too messed up or broke, just get two more pieces and make a whole new piece. Of course, the pipe would remain. We could still use the pipe, but the wood is just screwed to the pipe. And it's very simple. Change out. Again, this has lasted since 2016, just as it has. I've actually got it drilled right through a knot. I'm really amazed it hasn't cracked, or there's not a crack between this hole and the small hole. That's also very impressive. So if it works, you just keep doing it. And that's kind of how I do it. And so that is the pros and cons of using the portable workbench for my garage workshop.